The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows over the dry, wind-swept plains, and in the quiet of the fading light, the old rancher lay on a makeshift bed in the corner of his weathered cabin, his breaths shallow but steady, a hand pressed weakly against the wound that had finally brought him to the end of his journey. He had lived all his life as a man of the land, a caretaker of the soil and the cattle, a man who had known the satisfaction of honest labor but also the relentless ache of solitude, and now, as the blood left him inch by inch, he found himself thinking not of his own legacy, but of the boy who had grown up at his side without the guidance of a father who could truly understand him. The boy, a spirited lad with eyes like the open sky, had always admired him but had never known the security of a complete family, and in that moment, the rancher's gaze, heavy with the weight of mortality, fell upon the man who had come into his life years ago, an Apache warrior named Kiona, whose strength and honor had once seemed so distant, a figure from a world the rancher himself had barely dared to know, yet whose friendship had become the most steadfast anchor in his life. Kiona knelt beside the dying man, his dark eyes calm but vigilant, sensing the urgency that hung like a storm over the cabin, the boy too small to comprehend the gravity yet clinging to the promise of a world beyond his understanding, unaware that the threads of fate were pulling together in ways that would define the rest of his life. "Kiona," the rancher whispered, each word a struggle, "you're going to raise my son, better than I could." The words were simple, yet heavy with a lifetime of unspoken emotions, a confession that bridged the gap between two men of different blood and different worlds, and Kiona, whose life had been shaped by discipline and duty, felt a profound swell of responsibility that both frightened and honored him. He placed a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the pulse of youth and innocence beneath the roughness of a life already touched by hardship, and he knew that this promise would become a sacred oath, one he would carry beyond fear, beyond loss, and beyond the limits of what either of them had imagined possible. The rancher's lips quivered as he tried to speak again, telling Kiona of the dreams he had held for his son, of the lessons he wished he could impart, of the love he had hoped to give but had been denied by fate, and as his voice faltered, Kiona whispered assurances, his tone a mixture of reverence and resolve, promising to honor the bond that now tied them together in a covenant stronger than any they had known. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant fires, a reminder of the world beyond the cabin walls, a world that could be cruel and unforgiving, yet also capable of great beauty, and the boy clutched at Kiona's sleeve, sensing the weight of the moment even if he could not fully grasp its magnitude. Days turned into nights, and the rancher's body grew weaker, yet his spirit remained, sustained by the knowledge that his son would not be left alone, that Kiona would become more than a guardian, he would become a father in every sense that mattered. The first weeks after the rancher's passing were filled with quiet struggles, as Kiona navigated the unfamiliar routines of feeding and tending, teaching and protecting, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the boy began to respond, mirroring the strength and wisdom of the man who had promised to guide him. He learned the language of the land, the patterns of the seasons, the ways of the cattle and the ways of men, and with each passing day, Kiona saw the boy's confidence grow, saw the spark of understanding that came not from lectures but from lived experience, from shared toil and mutual respect. The boy, in turn, discovered a resilience within himself that he had never known, a capacity for courage and kindness that surprised even Kiona, and together, they forged a bond that transcended blood, one built on trust, honor, and the quiet but profound understanding that family was not solely determined by heritage but by the love and commitment one chose to give. Months passed, and the ranch flourished under their combined efforts, the land yielding as much to their care as it demanded in return, and in the evenings, by the fire, Kiona would recount tales of his people, stories of courage and wisdom, while the boy listened wide-eyed, absorbing lessons that no classroom could offer, learning that strength could be tempered with compassion, that honor required humility, and that the world, despite its hardships, was full of opportunities for grace and generosity. One winter evening, as snow blanketed the plains and the wind howled like the distant cries of the past, the boy was caught in a moment of fear, a sudden blizzard threatening to take him from the relative safety of the homestead, and without hesitation, Kiona rode out into the storm, his silhouette a dark shadow against the white expanse, braving the elements to ensure the boy's safety. When he returned, cold and weary, he held the boy close, and in that embrace, a lifetime of unspoken truths was shared, a silent acknowledgement that love, courage, and sacrifice were the truest measures of a man. The boy, shivering but alive, looked up at Kiona with eyes that now reflected not only fear but deep admiration, understanding at last that the man who had once seemed so different from his father had become the very embodiment of the principles the rancher had hoped to instill, and that the legacy of care, honor, and love would endure through them both. Seasons changed, and years rolled forward like the steady rhythm of the river that cut through the plains, and the boy grew into a man, shaped by the guidance, discipline, and unwavering support of Kiona, yet carrying within him the memory of the father he had lost, a memory that fueled his own empathy, his own sense of justice, and his own desire to create a world where differences were celebrated rather than feared. In time, neighbors and travelers began to notice the unusual bond between the man and the boy, the connection that defied the prejudices and boundaries so often drawn in the dust and blood of the land, and stories spread of the Apache who had become a father to a rancher's son, a story that inspired those who heard it, a testament to the power of humanity and the transformative strength of love. On a spring morning, with the first green shoots breaking through the thawed earth, the man, now grown and strong, stood with Kiona at his side, looking over the ranch that had been both a classroom and a sanctuary, and he realized that family had never been about the blood that ran through one's veins but the hearts that beat in concert, the hands that labored together, and the unwavering commitment to nurture, protect, and guide one another. In that moment, he understood the depth of his father's final words, the prophetic nature of the dying man's plea, and he felt gratitude that transcended sorrow, a profound joy that arose from knowing that love had not only bridged the gap between cultures, histories, and identities but had created something enduring, something eternal in its simplicity and truth. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of possibility and hope, and as the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the man looked at Kiona and spoke the words that carried the weight of his own journey. Blood made us different, but love made us family. Kiona's eyes glimmered with quiet pride, and the boy, now a young man ready to face the world, felt a sense of belonging deeper than any he had ever known, a bond forged not by accident but by choice, by courage, and by the willingness to rise above the divisions that too often defined humanity. Together, they walked across the land that had witnessed hardship and healing alike, knowing that the lessons learned, the sacrifices made, and the love shared would ripple through generations, creating a legacy that would endure long after the dust settled and the winds of time had carried away the echoes of their footsteps, a testament to the enduring truth that even in a world marked by difference, the human heart has the capacity to unite, to protect, and to cherish, and that in this unity lies the truest form of family, the most profound measure of humanity, and the eternal promise that love, above all else, can transform lives and heal the deepest wounds, leaving a legacy not written in blood but in the hearts of those willing to embrace it, to live it, and to carry it forward into a future filled with hope, compassion, and the unshakable certainty that in the end, it is not where we come from that defines us, but the love we give and the family we choose.